Hi, I'm Shalanda James, and today we're going to present to you the evolution of radio. I'm here outside of Miss Billy Jones, a 100-year-old, good-looking older woman who's going to talk to you about radio and through the ages and from her point of view. She's going to discuss things like the fireside chats, War of the Worlds in 1938. So take a seat, sit back, and listen to her tell her story.
I think it was 1924 when we got our first radio, somewhere around there. I was about 10, 11 years old. That's when some people started getting them in their houses. We got a Crosley XJ receiver, I think is what it was called. That was the cool radio to have. My mama met her doctor, so he was able to get us a radio. We were one of the first people. Not many people had them then. I think you paid like $10 for it. What is that, like $220 now? I think it would be expensive. They were really expensive. By the 1930s, I feel like most of my friends had them. We loved our radios. I remember it being my favorite piece of furniture. There were these big stained, dark wooden piece of furniture. Your main thing in the living room. I think I actually have a picture somewhere of me listening to one. There it is. See, that was me all the time. I sat in front of the radio. What will be the next big thing of radio I remember? President Roosevelt and his fireside chats. I remember those. They were the big deal. It was 1933, I think, was when the first one played, and he'd talk about everything from unemployment to banking, and he comforted us all when we were, during the Depression and war times and stuff. And I think he was all in the newspaper. All the radio companies all the programs had Roosevelt do it. After the fireside chats, the radio became real popular. Everybody started scheduling their days around the radios, their favorite program. I remember in late 30s, 37, 38, something like that, the Chase and Sanborn Hour, that was the popular show. Everybody wanted to listen to it. It was at Sundays at 8. It was a good time, Sundays at 8. We made sure supper was over by 7:45 sharp. They had everybody listening to them, and I remember some other station wanted to compete with them, and they played that they did a review, or they told a story of that book about aliens attacking, and everyone that was listening thought it was real, so they had like a big, huge panic of everybody thinking that book was a real story. And that was a big deal. And then, what is another big thing that I remember? Well, during war times, the radio got real boring. It was all war talk. Everything was war talk. And it kind of got tiresome, and people got sick of listening to it. I lost my husband during that time, and a lot of other, just people were sick of hearing about the war. It was in all of our lives a lot. And so people started to turn to other stations for entertainment. We wanted to hear things that were happier and things like that. So we tried to find comedy stations, and I remember by the mid-40s, the only thing on the radio was comedy stations. It was nonstop, 8 hours of this comedy show and 8 hours of that comedy show. But everything started to get a little more jolly by the 50s, and it was mid-40s, I think, when the TV was introduced. And people didn't really know about it. They weren't sure what it was, so the radio was still real popular then. And by the mid-40s, I think that was when the TV first started showing up. People were hearing about it, but they were really expensive, and no one really knew how they worked or what they were, so a lot of people didn't have them yet. And then in the 50s, we were a lot of housewives. All the women were housewives, and they had a lot of the morning shows geared towards us women. I remember one of my favorites was the Housewives' Choice, and which is nothing like the Housewives of Atlanta or whatever that those young folks watch these days. But yeah, that was my favorite show. And then by 1955, the TV started to overpower radio. It started making its way up in the early 50s, and then by 55, I guess, was when everyone was all excited about their TVs, and radios weren't the main piece of furniture in the house anymore. And I got my old friend Leroy Jenkins, that he's about my age, and I think he's going to tell you guys a little bit more about the 50s and a little bit of time that I was just at home, a stay-at-home mom and grandma playing with my grandbabies.
Shelly the Playboy, that was a station Win Radio. It had Shelly the Playboy, Tall Paul, Pat Williams, and the other guy, I can't remember their names, but during the Civil Rights era, they would give you messages to let you know when you had your marches. And I didn't really understand the messages. I would go by what my older brothers would tell me. And you had WJLD. There was a guy on JLD named Sam Moore. Don't know what happened to him. He moved over to Win later years when Tall Paul left. And basically these guys would tell you what you needed to know, because the white stations would not broadcast information relating to civil rights. They would give you the news as far as what was going on with police sicking dogs on people and all this kind of stuff. I just barely remember that kind of stuff. It's vivid now because I've seen it historically in special programs and whatever. But basically, Shelly the Playboy would give you all the information, he and Tall Paul, to let you know where the mass marches were being held, because most of them would start at a church in Birmingham, and they would leave there and proceed to either City Hall or Kelly Ingram Park, 16th Street Baptist Church, that area. And that's about all I can remember.
Okay. What you remember about on the radio in like the 70s? You remember any music? Did you have an afro?
Yeah, I had the afro with the long pork chop sideburns. As a matter of fact, my grandkids look at the picture and they think my sideburns were growed on. And it was all kind of disco and soul music. It was kind of a time when you could express yourself, and you had the music that everybody wanted to play. Like back in the 60s, you had groups like Sly and the Family Stone. Now they call it underground music, and it wasn't that bad. It was just some of the stuff they talked about, nobody, your parents didn't want you to hear about it. And matter of fact, there was a song called Funky Broadway. And it's funny, but we could not repeat the lyrics to that song. And it was just that strict, you know. And it was a time where everybody went to church. And it didn't matter where you went or what you did the day before, you was going to be in church the next day. So, you know, everybody had their Christian value. And it all revolved again around radio and broadcasting.
Man, Leroy and them pork chop sideburns, he just thought he was the stuff. He those pork chop sideburns. Oh, but that's enough about the 70s. But I don't really have a whole lot to tell everybody about those 80s and on. I don't know how to work into that new stuff, that you know, small little tiny thing, the headphones. I don't know what any of that stuff is. I listen to the TV and this
Let's talk
thing
80s,
over
Grandma
here.
BJ.
Yeah, this
By
is.
the way, I have coffee for you.
Thank you.
So it's not Starbucks.
This
You don't
is
like
my
Starbucks.
grandson Dan. He knows all about the new stuff. I remember when he was little.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about the 80s, because the 80s, the boombox. You hated those things. For
Yeah,
some
he
reason.
had that big old box on his
You said
shoulder.
it's too
you know,
loud. You
yeah.
live right next door.
Hey, you tell him about it.
Well,